section, we're going to talk about coming up with a new approach to passing the bar exam. So here we're going to go through the questions we just reviewed and talk about how you can change your approach based on your responses. So we're going to just start with the very fundamentals. And by the way, I recommend that you have this printed out, and I would start by just drawing a star next to any changes you really want to make or jotting any notes in the margins, because you can really use this when we get to the next step, which is making a study schedule. You want to basically tailor your schedule to what you really need to do to pass the bar exam. Okay, so let's start with the fundamentals. So first, did I dedicate enough time to studying each week? Time is truly your most valuable asset when you're studying for the bar exam, because you do need to study for a certain amount of time to pass. If you didn't, then how can you improve this? Well, take time off work if possible. I know some people can't, but if you can afford to, it really makes a difference. Seek help with obligations if you can, like for example, childcare, chores. If you have a bunch of family members that feel sorry for you for not passing the bar exam, now is the time to ask them if they can help you with some of these activities. Again, it'll save you time, and time is your most valuable asset. Put time in your calendar to study now so it's blocked off. I had a student who, he went to one of the worst law schools in the country. He scored really low on the bar exam. I was nervous about him passing. I didn't think he was going to pass, and I told him, I'm nervous about you passing. He couldn't afford to take time off work, so he worked full-time and he did private tutoring on the side. And he had the most rigorous study schedule. He would study from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. before work, and then he would go to bed at around midnight, which I don't really recommend. I think more sleep is important. But he was so dedicated, he really made it a priority to pass the bar exam, and he passed. Even though, honestly, I didn't think he was going to when I first talked to him, because his scores were just low and the circumstances weren't very good. But he blocked off time, and he was completely dedicated to it. And that's the kind of dedication that's sometimes needed to pass the bar exam. Sometimes, if you work full-time, you really do burn the candle at both ends, but sometimes it's necessary if you want to get past this roadblock here. And consider skipping a bar exam if you really have full-time obligations that cannot be changed. Some people get married, or they have, they're working really hard for a certain season. Consider skipping a bar exam and then maybe starting to study early for the next one. The last thing you want to do is just get into this cycle of taking the next bar exam and failing it and retaking it and then failing it. Sometimes a bar exam off can be a good thing. Okay, did I dedicate a sufficient number of weeks to study? At least 8 to 10. If not, you want to start now, you want to start early, put it in your calendar, or consider skipping a bar exam if you need to. Did I have a distraction-free environment to look at or to study in? Look at when you study, basically the who, what, where, when, how. When you study, like morning might be better than evening. Where you study, a library might be better than at home. It's hard sometimes at home when I'm working at home or, when I was studying at home, I'd find myself in the kitchen making a sandwich. I'm not even hungry. It's just like sometimes there's a lot of distractions at home. How you study, maybe you shouldn't have your phone out, or you shouldn't have any, your internet connected or whatever. Maybe you should delete social media. There are certain things that you might be able to do to minimize distractions. Who you study with, by yourself might be the best. Rather than with a study partner, and what you study. Do you make a to-do list every day? Often it's very easy to stay organized if you have a to-do list that you're making every day, so that you don't just sit down and say, I'm going to study, but you actually have a plan. You have a checklist of things to do. Just little things like that can make a big difference. Okay, so next, was I able to maintain my mental health when I studied? Like, did I suffer from depression, anxiety, excessive stress, or panic attacks, or suicidal thoughts? Your mental health is so important, and it's so common to struggle with mental health issues while you're studying for the bar exam. We hear from people all the time who unfortunately are really depressed or anxious, or they consider suicide. So this is more important than passing the bar exam, is taking care of your mental health. And even taking care of your mental health will help you pass the bar exam, because you'll be able to study better. So just no matter what, make this a priority. A healthier you will just be, better all around. So consider talking to your doctor, incorporating exercise into your schedule, making sure you're sleeping enough. Incorporate other stress relievers, whatever helps you personally, like meditation, anything that you find helps ease your mental state. And again, mental health is of the utmost importance. So this should be a high priority. It's truly a fundamental. Okay, next, resources. Did I use a bar review course? If you didn't use it, you're just paying for it doesn't mean you use it. Sometimes we have people pay for our course, they literally don't even sign in. So, do they even count as someone who took our course? I don't know. But be honest with yourself about whether you used your course. Did you watch the lectures? Did you complete the assignments? If you did not use a course, if you did not use your course, consider why. Did you just not have the time? Did you not find it helpful? If not, you might want to consider a different course or private tutoring or other resources. There's really not one right answer. Some people really benefit from the structure of a course. So maybe one course didn't work out for them, but a different course will. Other people don't. They benefit more from private tutoring or they're fine self-studying. So I'm not going to tell you need to sign up for a course, you need to do this. I'm just asking you to be honest with yourself about your experience with your past bar review course. And what I don't recommend is don't just repeat the exact same bar review course in the exact same way. There's no point in doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result the second time. If it didn't work for you once, it's probably not going to work for you the next time. So the key is you want to change your approach. All right, were my outlines helpful, organized, and easy to review? If not, how can I improve this? Consider using different outlines. Some courses will give you multiple versions of outlines, a shorter one, a longer one, a lecture handout, whatever. So if one, real property outline didn't work for you, consider using a different one. Signing up for a different course, or using best practices. Some people will look at 4 different torts outlines and cross-reference them and compare them and drive themselves crazy. Just stick to one outline per subject. Find one you trust, stick to it, and then, it'll be much easier to learn and review this outline. Outlines are really important because basically they're going to form the basis of what you memorize. So if you don't have good outlines, then you're kind of starting, from below zero. You at least want good outlines. They're the foundation of what you're going to be memorizing, and the law that you'll be memorizing, you'll be putting into, applying to MBE questions and essay questions. So you want to make sure you have good outlines. Did I use released essay questions like MPTs and MEEs? If not, go to the National Conference of Bar Examiners has some for free. Some companies sell them, including us, JD Advising. If you're in a state that does not administer the Uniform Bar Exam, like if you're in Michigan or California, check your state's website because most states will have them for free on their website. And your bar review course should offer them. Most do. Some don't offer enough, in my opinion, so you can consider other resources. Did I use released MBE questions? I really do recommend using released MBE questions. Like actually making sure that you're using questions that are written by the National Conference of Bar Examiners. These are the most similar in format to what you'll see on the MBE. And also, you're going to see issues that are most likely to be tested again on the MBE if you use released questions. So the cheapest source is the Strategies and Tactics for the MBE book by Emmanuel. There's about 550 questions you can get on Amazon, maybe for between $50 and $70, depending on when you look. It's a paper book. Maybe if you like doing things on paper, this is a good resource for you. And then JD Advising, Adaptive Bar, the NCBE, we all have released questions in an electronic question bank. So it's convenient in some ways because you can see how you're scoring in different subjects and topics. So that's very convenient. You can do them on the go, like if you like to, do them when you have a break sometime, that's convenient. It's harder to lug around a book. There's drawbacks to the bar exam. As of right now, is on paper, and so sometimes people like to buy paper books because that's how they'll be taking the bar exam. So it kind of is just a matter of personal preference. One thing you don't want to do, though, is don't buy all of these, sources because everybody's using the same question bank. There's only so many released questions. So don't go ahead and buy, ours, JD Advisings, and Adaptive Bars, and the NCBEs. You're just going to see the same question over and over again. Okay, understanding. Would I be able to provide an explanation of some of these concepts? And again, I would recommend you try to explain these out loud. If you struggle with this aspect, then it might be helpful to rewatch helpful course lectures. I wouldn't necessarily watch all of them. Most students who repeat the bar exam do not rewatch all course lectures, but you can rewatch the ones that you find helpful or the subjects that you struggle with. Consider private tutoring, especially if you scored really low. Consider trying a different course. Maybe they'll explain things in a different way or have things organized in a different way. Or consider other resources like study groups. Consult your school to see if they offer something for bar exam takers. Memorization. So do I have the law memorized? Just as a little tip here, a lot of students think they have the law memorized, but they don't. We have an MBE diagnostic which tells students whether they struggle with memorization, application, or comprehension. And I'll just save you some money and say that most people struggle with memorization. And the problem is they know the general principles of the law. So when we say, do you have the law memorized? They say yes, because they think they do. They understand the general principles. They're not lost. They get the fundamentals. But the problem is they don't have the nuances memorized. And the multiple choice portion of the bar exam and the essay portion of the bar exam test the nuances of the law. So if you don't have the nuances memorized, you're going to struggle and you're not going to do well, even if you know the general principles. So I would, see if you have the law memorized, focus on one outline per subject when you're memorizing the laws. Focus especially on the highly tested areas, which we have lists of so that you can, see the highly tested areas. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Just as an example, for example, in torts, 12 to 13 questions test negligence. So that's so important to know. Versus in real property, only one MBE question will test the rule against perpetuities. So it's much less important to know. You want to focus on things that are going to pick you up, that are going to help you pick up the most points, because these are the areas that will increase your score the most. All right, and then break down your outline into manageable chunks. So for example, with torts, don't just say I'm going to memorize the torts outline. That's exhausting. Even if you like torts, it's still exhausting. Start with something like intentional torts, and then move on to the next section, defenses to intentional torts. And when you go through each section, try to memorize the intentional torts and their elements. Like say, do I know assault, battery, trespass to land, trespass to chattels, false imprisonment, whatever? Do I have all of these rules memorized? What I used to do is I would just cover up my outline, then I'd try to jot down the elements really quickly. Act, intent, contact. See if I can hit all the main elements of all of these torts, and then it would take a while the first time I went through it, and I would get things wrong, but I would keep looking at it over and over and over again until I had all the intentional torts memorized. Then I'd move on to the next section, like defenses to intentional torts. Do the same thing, move on to the next section. And this is hard work, but it makes a huge difference in your score. It's honestly probably one of the fastest ways to improve your MBE score and your essay score. And it takes so much energy that people do sometimes resist doing it. But just do it at your best time of day. If you study it the best in the morning, do it in the morning. Get it over with. Start your day off right. And you will honestly see your score improve quite a bit. So we link to memorization tips, YouTube videos, bar exam memorization quiz if you're not really sure if you struggle with memorization. So hopefully these areas will help you. Did I focus on the highly tested areas of law? We have an MEE guide, an MBE guide, a California essay guide. These will tell you the highly tested areas of law if you weren't focusing on these. Did I dedicate time to reviewing the law each day? So if you're studying for 7 hours, I would say you should be spending at least an hour on memorization every day. And if you're not, then add this into your schedule every day. To make it easier for yourself, do this within 24 hours of watching a lecture on a subject. You will retain significantly more if you do this. Studies show that you'll remember a lot more. It'll be a lot less work for you later if you look at an outline right after you watch a lecture on it. I would recommend doing it the same day, but if not, just do it the next day. Do it within 24 hours. And do it at your best time of day. So if you study in the morning, the best. If your brain's the most active then when you're drinking a cup of coffee, then do it then. And focus on memorizing about one outline per week, let's say, for the MBE subjects, but also dedicate time to reviewing past outlines. What you don't want to do is look at real property in week 1 and not look at it again until week 10, because you will forget it. So what I would recommend you do is, for example, if you look at torts in week 1, you're really going to spend a lot of time with torts in week 1, and you're going to memorize that outline. Look at it again in week 2, week 3. It'll take you some time. It should not take you nearly as much time because you already know it, but you just want to make sure you're retaining the information. And what I would do is have a list of outlines. And once I learned an outline, I'd add it to the list. And then every week I'd put the list on a whiteboard and I'd erase the subject as I looked at it. So if I'd already looked at torts, real property, evidence, crim law, and I'm on week 5 and I'm looking at something else, I would have all those outlines written down and I would make sure I looked at least once. If I started with real property in week 1, by the time I got to week 5, it's not going to take me long at all because I already know the outline. I've already looked at it for 5 weeks, versus something I looked at more recently might take a little bit more time. But this helped me retain the information and really know it cold by the time I got to the bar exam. All right, did I use active learning techniques? Have you just read the outline or ignored it? No. We don't have enough time to go through all of these learning techniques, but we have links to a lot of bar exam memorization techniques, bar exam learning style quiz, so that you can, and we also have a short YouTube series on bar exam memorization, so you can make sure that you're using the proper learning techniques. Practice questions. Did I practice enough questions? I would say at least 800 MBE questions. Most likely 1,000 would be better. It's not that bad. If you're studying for 10 weeks, it's about 80 questions per week, so 16 to 20 per day. MBE questions at least 50. This sounds like a lot to people, but if you study for 10 weeks, it's 1 a day. And if you get the structure of your essay down, you can start to bullet point them. MPT questions, at least 10. Honestly, I recommend 20. The MPT is very overlooked, and it's often very easy for students to improve their score if they put in the practice. Keep in mind, the MPT in a uniform bar exam state is worth 20% of your score, so it's not unreasonable to start as a default, doing MPT questions for 20% of your time. So if you're studying for 5 days a week, literally 1 full day should be dedicated to the MPT. And again, it's a good jumping off point. Maybe you need a little more, maybe you need a little less. And did I review model answers and compare my answers for the essays in MBE I practiced? Sometimes students will just write essay questions and hand them in, but they don't really look at the feedback. They don't really look at the model answer. And then they're not honestly going to improve. The best thing you can do is once you've answered a question, like once you've answered an MBE question, go to the back of the book or go to the explanation and make sure you understand why you got it wrong, if you got it wrong. And then you're halfway there if you do that, because you want to understand it why, but you also want to memorize it. So then I would recommend you write it down somewhere. Like I call this the legal pad method, where you write it down and then you keep reviewing that legal pad so that you turn those weaknesses into strengths. You can actually memorize a lot that you get wrong rather than just saying, oh yeah, that's why I got it wrong and moving on, because you're looking at too much every day. If you just look at the answer explanation without making an active habit to review it again later, you're going to forget it because you're just looking at too much every day. Same with the essay portion. We found when we first started teaching essay courses, we found that students who would self-grade their essays, so they would actually pretend to be a grader. They would answer their questions as a student, and then they go back in a different color font or pen and grade their own essays. And we used to recommend this, but we didn't require it. What we found, though, was that students that did that scored so much higher on the bar exam than students that simply handed their essay in without self-grading it first. And so now we require all of our students in our courses and who do private tutoring with us to, when they answer a question, go in as a grader and actually grade their answer. Say things like, this is what you did well, this is what you didn't do well, and then hand it in, and our graders will often spot additional things that they can work on. But this is the best way to build your confidence. It's the best way to make sure you're on track and feel good about being on track, because you're actually getting into the mind of a grader, and you get into the mind of a grader. You understand what they want to see and what they don't want to see. You won't make some of the silly mistakes that students make on the bar exam. I was just reviewing essays for an appeal here in Michigan, and the student started off every essay with like a half a page of background information, which is not going to earn him any credit at all. I didn't earn him any credit on the bar exam, and it's not going to an appeal because graders aren't looking for that. And if he would have just self-graded, before he took the bar exam, he wouldn't have been making those kinds of mistakes. And I'm not sure what course he used or what he did or if he handed essays in, but it's things like that you can really catch by self-grading. And we have tips on how to do this in the links. Okay, and timing. Did I complete the MBE within the appropriate time? What about the MEE? What about the MPT? Did I feel rushed? I'm not going to go through each section here, but I just want to tell you the main points. The main things you can do if you struggle with timing. First, make sure you're using released questions, because that's going to get you most used to the difficulty and format of the exam. And then set up a practice schedule where you're incrementally increasing the time that you're taking timed exams. Like for the MBE, start with 33 questions in an hour. Move up to 66 questions in 2 hours. For the MEE portion, if you're doing 30-minute essays, start with 2 MEEs in an hour and then move up to 4 MEEs in 2 hours. basically you want to kind of increase incrementally the time that you're spending on this. Make practice a priority. It'll help you with your timing and it'll increase your confidence. For the essays specifically, you want to make sure that you're omitting background information and area like fluff, things that you don't get a lot of credit for. I recently just did a speech where a bar exam grader talked and also a bar exam writer talked, so somebody who wrote the questions talked, and they both said, please just omit the long introductions of, law that's not relevant. They just want you to dive into the issues that are being asked about. So especially if you struggle with timing, make sure you're doing that because it'll save you time and the graders will be happy about it. So those are some tips for the MPT. Make sure you get the formatting down. You want to have some things like format completely down before you walk into the MPT, so you're not wasting time thinking about it ahead of time. Okay, so that goes over the basic questions for the worksheet. Next, we're going to talk about how to create a bar exam study schedule in part 2. So stay tuned.